Hey, what's up, everybody? This is Vincent. Hope you guys are doing well. This will be our version of today's Monday morning mastermind, even though it's not morning except for, I think, Hawaii. So I guess technically we're still in the morning. But want to go over very, very important topic with you here. It's called due diligence, okay? And the reason for this Facebook Live and what will then be turned into a podcast is to show you what the problems are with not doing your due diligence and relying on the information provided by other people. So if you see this page that I'm on, this is a page from Investopedia. Now, most people would believe that Investopedia would be an authority, right, on investing. I mean, look at the name. What is their name? Investopedia, right? Kind of like encyclopedia or Wikipedia. You would think that by coming to this website, you would get actual bona fide, verifiable information that would lead you down the right track and not put you in a bad position or a position by which you would lose money. All right, so here's how I got to this page. A couple days ago, this is before the weekend. There's a guy by the name of Brian Gibbons. He goes by REI Skills, Brian Gibbons. And this is not to bash him, but he friended me on, what the hell was it, Bigger Pockets about 10 years ago. And then finally did the same thing here on Facebook, I don't know, a while back. And, he's a nice guy. And there's definitely some things that he certainly has experience with. So this is not an attempt to bash him, but it's imperative to understand why you got to be real careful listening to anybody. Okay, this is why I always tell you, I don't care who it is. Even if it's me, you always do your due diligence and make sure you verify and back up through statute, through your own due diligence process, whatever, what someone is telling you, because he ends up posting a link to this page that we're looking at right here, Investopedia, and then goes on to talk about how, magnificent owner finance deals are, seller finance deals. And this article is an example of all of the different benefits or whatever of seller financing. Now, I looked at it, I read the article, and I came back to him immediately. I just told him, man, this is, it's a bunch of garbage. I mean, this is a garbage article. Okay, I don't care if it's on Investopedia or not. There's so much that's totally incorrect. I don't know who this Amy Fontanelle is that is the author, but in many circumstances here, she doesn't know what she's talking about. And I'm going to show it to you. We're actually going to go through this article, and I want you to understand you're going to get the real truth that you can then go verify, okay? So we're going to go through this line by line. There are things in here that are accurate. I will give her that. But there are things in here that are absolutely 110% not accurate, okay? And it's coming from a website that most people would perceive to be an authority. Okay, and then you have it then being promulgated and promoted by somebody else who is an internet guru selling courses or whatever, as if this is the gospel, even though it contains a ton of information that is factually and legally incorrect. All right, so let's just go through this real quick. So here's how the article starts out. This was updated September 22nd, 2020, so only a couple of months ago. So it's not like this article is from 1989. This was a couple of months ago. It was updated by whoever Amy Fontanelle is. All right. When it comes to financing residential real estate, most transactions follow a well-worn process. That's true. Seller finds a willing buyer with the required income, employment history, and credit score to qualify for a mortgage, and a lending institution puts up the money to finance the deal. That is true. That's also true. Okay. For those of you who don't know, 98% of all mortgages nationwide involve some type of mortgage finance. This is me telling you this. Okay. Now let's get back to the article. But what if traditional financing is unavailable and the buyer and seller still want to proceed privately with the sale? Enter what's known as seller financing. Okay, that's also true. As the term implies, the person who's selling the house finances the purchase rather than the bank providing a mortgage to the buyer. That's correct. Okay. All right. Key takeaways. In residential real estate transaction, one option is seller financing. The person who's selling the house finances the purchase rather than the bank providing a mortgage to the buyer. That's correct. Seller finance transactions can be quicker and cheaper than conventional ones. Also correct. Buyers in the deal need to confirm the seller is indeed free to finance. And then it has in parentheses, no mortgage or the mortgage lender allows it. Totally incorrect. Okay? Absolutely false. Okay? And should be prepared to make a down payment. That too is absolutely false. Okay? I have done literally, I bought, sold, option, whatever you want to call it, done variants of owner financing for the last 30 years. I have never once put money down on any property at all. So a down payment is not required. Okay? All right. Seller financing typically runs for a shorter period than a conventional mortgage. Says who? Where's this information even coming from? Where is the source of that information? That's not necessarily true, because you can do a fully amortized 30-year fixed rate mortgage or 40-year fixed rate mortgage that never has to be refinanced on seller financing in the same exact way that you can with a conventional mortgage, right? Now, the reality is that most people that do seller financing, or let me back up, most buyers in a owner finance or seller financing deal typically want to qualify as quickly as possible while rates are at, especially right now, historic lows. So it would normally run theoretically a shorter period of time, but let me tell you what the actual facts are, okay? The national average length of time in a home runs 3 to 4 years, okay? 3 to 4 years, right? And the reason I know that is because I got that directly from, for those of you that are old enough to remember who Countrywide was, back in the day, that they priced all of their loans to churn at the 36-month mark. And what that means is they knew that by the time that right around 36 months came around, that mortgage was either going to pay off. Well, let me back up. The mortgage was going to pay off via either a sale, which means the people sold the house and moved, or via refinance, okay? Now, the average person, like I said, in an uninterrupted, let me rephrase it, what's the best way to say this? In a business environment, a business climate, a real estate climate that is not artificially influenced by the criminal cartel known as government, like what we've got going on right now with all of the moratoriums on evictions and foreclosures, national average length of time in a home runs 3 to 4 years. All right. If all of you that are on this Facebook Live now or that listen to the podcast go back and you calculate how many homes have you lived in and you divide it by your age, I will tell you that 99% of the time it's going to run on an average of 3 to 4 years. Now, you may have been in a home 7 or 10 years. You may have been in a home 2 years. You may have been in a home 6 months. But the national average runs between 3 and 4 years, okay? That is, we're talking about conventional financing or non-conventional. It doesn't make a difference, okay? It's the same thing. The reason for that is people move. They have to move for jobs. They have to move for upsizing, downsizing, whatever. Family situations, whatever the situation is, people move. We're a migrant society. Let me rephrase that. Migratory society. Okay. So they don't, always run for shorter periods of time than a conventional mortgage, because a typical mortgage pays off in 36 months on average, right? Both parties, here we go. Let's continue on. Both parties in the transaction should hire professionals to draw up the contract and promissory note. Now, that's another statement I do not agree with. I've got an entire podcast episode on why attorneys don't make it legal. And I have seen contracts from attorneys that were absolute, complete disasters as it relates to the way things were put together. Now, if you are going to go to an attorney, and you better take my advice on this, because trust me when I tell you, I know something about it. If you're going to go to an attorney to get a contract prepared, the only attorney that you ever want to prepare a contract for you is a real estate litigator, okay? I'm not talking about your average run-of-the-mill guy that runs a real estate title closing office, whatever you guys want to call it, okay? Some of you guys are in attorney states. Some of you are in title states where companies like Stewart Title or Old Republic or Chicago Title, whatever it is, can close for you. You do not want a quote-unquote vanilla real estate attorney, a guy that sits there and does closings all day. That is not who you want to prepare or review your contract. You want a real estate litigator, okay? The guy that's actually in the courts, duking it out, fighting, and knows exactly what's going on. All right? It's only through dealing with somebody like that you're going to find out what the inherent problems are that you need to be watching out for, especially with you guys doing these lease options and creating disguised sales. Okay, so let's continue on with this because, again, the purpose of this for you guys just jumping on is they come across as the authority but it's loaded with garbage that's not true, okay? And you have to be able to sift through all this stuff and know what's actually going on, as opposed to just reading this and saying, okay, that's really the way, that's the gospel, the way it is. All right. Advantages of seller financing. This alternative to traditional financing is a useful option at times or in places where mortgages are hard to get. That's true. In such tight conditions, seller financing allows buyers access to an alternative form of credit. That's true. Sellers, in turn, can tap a population of buyers who don't necessarily qualify for a traditional mortgage. That's true. And because the seller is financing the sale, the property may command a higher sales price. Well, that's up for debate. Maybe yes, maybe no. All right. Transaction between two parties. A bank isn't directly involved in a seller finance sale. The buyer and seller make the arrangements themselves. That's true. They draw up a promissory note setting out the interest rate, schedule payments from buyer to seller, and the consequences should the buyer default on those obligations. That is maybe true, and it's maybe not true. It depends on what type of contract that you're using. On a contract for deed, there is no promissory note. Okay, there is no interest rate. It's strictly a schedule of payments and potentially a balloon. Okay, and that's it. Okay, so again, this is not gospel. That's why it's imperative to understand what you're dealing with to do your own due diligence. Your own due diligence. All right. Now back to the article. Unlike a sale involving a mortgage, then there is no transfer of the principal from buyer to seller, but merely an agreement on repaying the sum over time. I don't even know what that means. Okay, no transfer of the principal. What do you mean? There's no transfer of the principal from buyer to seller. Okay, the buyer would be transferring principal on a fully amortized deal on a monthly basis, plus he'd have a down payment, which is also a transfer of principal. Okay, so again, doesn't make I don't understand the entire sentence on what they're trying to convey there. Okay, back to the article. With only two main players involved, owner financing can be quicker and cheaper than selling a home in the customary way. This is absolutely true. All right, Willie Catherine Suggs, the principal broker and owner of the Harlem-based real estate brokerage that carries her name, says that when the seller finances the sale, quote, the deals close faster as there is no waiting for the bank, loan officer, underwriter, and legal department to clear the file, unquote. That's 100% true. Suggs also notes that buyers love seller financing because they can get in the home for less money. That may or may not be true. Okay, it really all depends on what the deal is. Sometimes yes, sometimes no. Okay, lower closing costs. Closing costs are indeed lower for a seller-financed sale without a bank, and that may or may not be true, but anyway, without a bank participating, the transaction avoids the cost of mortgage or discount points, as well as origination fees and a host of other charges lenders routinely level during the financing process. That's true because then you don't have to, you can avoid title insurance, which is worthless anyway, and all the fees with origination and doc prep and all the other stuff, okay? There's also greater flexibility, at least ostensibly, about the loan provisions from the required down payment to the interest rate to the term of the agreement. It's greater flexibility because it's basically between the buyer and the seller, whatever they decide. All right, back to the article. The seller's financing typically runs only for a fairly short term, such as 5 years, with a balloon payment coming due at the end of that period. Where is this information coming from? I don't even know where this is coming from. We've done them for as little as 12 months. Okay, we've done them for 30 years. It doesn't mean, I don't even know, like, it's like they make they vomit up these statements as if they're facts somehow. And really, I think what she's trying to quote here is Dodd-Frank, which wouldn't allow a balloon prior to 5 years on a traditional owner-occupied deal. But I don't know where else she would be getting that. All right, next up, the theory, or the hope at least, is that the buyer will eventually refinance that payment with a traditional lender armed with improved creditworthiness and having accumulated some equity in the home. Now, again, not true, possibly true, because we get people all the time that there's absolutely no problem whatsoever with their creditworthiness, okay? Self-employed people on owner finance deals, we get them with 700, 800 credit scores all the time. They don't have a problem with their credit. They have problems with verifying income because they're taking every legal tax deduction they can take. And what it does is it reduces their net income on the 1040. And so they don't qualify from an income standpoint, even though they have the funds and they can make the payment. The way the bank underwrites the file, they underwrite the tax returns, they don't have that. So just because somebody does owner financing does not mean they have bad credit. Okay. So understand that. It also, this whole thing about accumulating equity in the home, there's no guarantee of accumulating equity for a number of reasons. Number one, as an example, the loans the contracts that we do, we all do, they're always 100% interest only. Okay, for a number of reasons, because it's 100% tax deductible for the buyer, and it gets them actual cash back if it's a W-2 employee in their paycheck every 2 weeks. Okay, so it maximizes their actual real cash, not some phantom paper credit down the road, and they get it right now. Now, the other thing about equity is, equity, if you understand what it is, it's the difference between the value of the home and how much you owe on it. Well, you could be in a depreciating environment and be making your payments, and they could be fully amortized, but you still could not be generating any equity because you're not outpacing the rate of price deflation. But they don't tell you this stuff, okay? All right, what buyers need, we're going back to the article now. What buyers need to know? For all the potential pluses to seller financing, transactions that use it come with risks and realities for both parties. Well, welcome to real estate investing, okay? And welcome to real estate in general. That's the way it works on every deal, whether it's owner financing or not. Here's what buyers should consider before they finalize a seller finance deal. All right, this is, again, the article. Don't expect better terms than with a mortgage. This is absolute nonsense. Why? Why would you not expect better terms than with a mortgage? You can very easily get better terms than with a mortgage. It all depends on how you negotiate the deal. All right, back to the article. As the terms of a seller finance deal are hammered out, flexibility frequently meets reality. The seller digests their financial needs and risks, including the possibility the buyer will default on the loan with the prospect of a potentially expensive and messy eviction process. Is that a legitimate concern? Yes, of course it is. It's what I call basically when you enter into, it doesn't matter if it's a lease, just a lease alone, or if you're doing any type of creative financing, whether that's contract for deed, land trust, land contracts, whatever. Sellers are always going to be concerned about what I call the 2 Ds. It's damage and default. Okay, we don't want damage or we don't want default. So that's potentially legit. All right, back to the article. Upshot can be sobering for the buyer. For example, it's possible you'll secure a more favorable interest rate than banks are offering. Okay, that's absolutely true. Okay, it's entirely possible, but it's more likely you'll pay more. That's not true. Okay, that is absolutely not true that you would pay more than what banks are offering. Okay, again, it's all these things that they're saying as if they're the gospel that really have no basis in reality or in fact. Okay, so understand that for what it is. You can negotiate owner finance deals that are the exact same rate and or lower than what banks are doing right now. Okay. Anyway, all right. Perhaps saving, perhaps several additional percentage points above the prevailing rate. Where does this come from? I'm not saying it can't happen. I'm not saying it doesn't happen. Back in the day, the general rule of thumb was 10% interest. I'm talking about. Okay. 10% interest is typically, what the average, vanilla owner finance, seller finance. It's not that way anymore. It hasn't been for a very, very long time. Okay. You can negotiate deals right now on, I'm talking about turnkey, move-in ready houses where all you're doing is absorbing the existing rate that the seller has on the property. And since rates have been at historic lows for the last, 13 years, 12 years, you can go walk into an owner finance deal at 2 or 3% right now because guess what? Somebody's got to move and they can't sell it conventionally for whatever reason. So all they're looking to do is get out. So just because you're doing seller financing does not mean that you're going to be paying more than if you did conventional financing. Okay, it's total nonsense. Okay, all right, next up, back to the article. And you'll probably have to provide a down payment that's comparable in size to those of a typical mortgage that is 20% or more of the property's value. Where in the hell did this come from? Okay, you don't, Fannie Mae, if you go FHA, Fannie Mae, Freddie Mac, whatever it is, their standard down payment is not 20%. Okay, standard down payment on seller financing is not 20%. Most people don't have 20% to put down. I'm not saying that no deal has ever been done at 20% now, because certainly many have, but that is not the rule of thumb for a seller financed deal. Okay, so again, excuse me, more hogwash. It's just total nonsense. Okay, from Investopedia. All right, next up. You may need to sell yourself to the seller. It's smart to be transparent and straightforward about the reasons you didn't qualify for a traditional mortgage. That's like really stupid. No, you don't even want to get involved in all that. But anyway, nonetheless, some of that information may emerge anyway when the seller checks your credit history and other background data, including your employment, assets, financial claims, and references. Well, again, this is only if you don't know what the hell you're doing, because I have contracted on over $100 million personally, myself, of properties via owner finance contracts and variants, and have never once had my credit pulled or filled out an application, okay? Because I'm an investor and I know what I'm doing. Now, if you're, Johnny homeowner and you don't know what you're doing and you let them, the tail wag the dog and you go through that process, then yeah, you can get railroaded right into that scenario where you're going through the traditional application process. But as an investor, I contract on properties all the time without providing credit. Nobody's ever pulled my credit on an owner finance deal. Not once, not in 30 years. Okay? I haven't filed an application. But for what? It's a contract. And I try to tell you guys this stuff all the time. To do one of these deals, you can do, start and finish in the same day. All you need is a buyer, a seller, and a contract, and that is it, my friends. Not all this other nonsense. Okay, back to the article. But make sure, too, that you point out any restrictions on your ability to borrow that may not service during the seller's due diligence. I don't even understand what that means or why. It has nothing to do with the seller finance contract. Okay? All right. Todd Huetner, a mortgage broker and the president of Denver-based Huetner Capital, points out that even a potential buyer who has good credit and hefty down payment on hand may have recently started a new business and so be unable to qualify for a loan up to 2 years. 100% true. Okay, we just talked about problems with self-employed individuals. That's one of them if they can't document 2 years worth of tax returns in whatever the new business is. And the other problem is that if you're self-employed in those first, you'd be stupid to have any income shown. IRS generally grants anywhere from 3 to 5 years of losses when you first start off in a business. And by losses, we're talking about legitimate business write-offs. So the average intelligent self-employed individual would not be showing income of any kind and typically would not qualify within the first 2 years if they have a CPA that knows what he's doing. Okay. All right, back to the article. Be prepared to propose seller financing. I totally agree with this. Homeowners who offer seller financing often openly announce that fact in the hope of attracting buyers who don't qualify for mortgages. That's not necessarily true. Most of the time, most of the contracts that we do, are properties that, occasionally you'll see somebody offering owner financing, but most of the deals that I've done, I would say, greater than probably 95% have all been properties that were not listed as open to owner financing. They were either properties that were strictly for rent or properties that were strictly for sale. Okay. There was no middle ground in between. And so what I had to do was you guys can listen to it on the podcast. You can actually hear how the deals go down. Go in and ask the right questions and put the deal together and introduce the idea of owner financing in the event that either A, they didn't sell conventionally, which is what, of course, most people, when they list a property for sale, is what they want to do. Or B, a better deal than strictly having a rental, okay, for most people. So, I wouldn't really say that's accurate. All right. Next up, he says, when you do, he says, propose the option as explicitly as you can. Rather than asking if owner financing is an option, Huetner recommends the buyer present a specific proposal. For example, my offer is full price with 20% down. Seller financing for $350,000 at 6%, amortized over 30 years with a 5-year balloon loan. Let me just tell you something, folks. If you go out there and you do that, you're gonna watch the eyes of the seller glaze over because they're not gonna understand half of what you just said. Okay, that's not how you do it. You listen to the podcast, you can hear how it's done correctly. Okay. Next up, back to the article. If I don't refinance in 2 to 3 years, I'll increase the rate to 7% in years 4 and 5. Okay. Yeah, you could do that. I don't know why you would do it. Why you would do that and offer that out of the gate. This guy doesn't know what he's doing as it relates to negotiating seller finance deals. Okay, that's not how you negotiate a seller finance deal. All right, next up, confirm the seller is free. Okay, this is a good one here. This is, again, one of the reasons why we're going through this, so you can understand the nonsense that's out there from, perceived authorities like Investopedia. Confirm the seller is free to finance the sale. Seller financing is simplest when the seller owns the property outright. That's not true. A mortgage held on the property introduces extra complications. That's not true. Paying for a title search on the property will confirm that it's accurately described in the deed and is free from a mortgage or tax liens. Okay, I guess that is true, but it's not. Title search isn't necessary. We don't do them on any of the owner finance deals that we do because it's a total waste of time and money at the time that you execute a contract on the property. And the reason for that is because in the contract, okay, the seller is agreeing to provide, guess what? Clear and marketable title. So, and there's no way for you to shield the title while the buyer is in the owner finance portion, actually, or ever, doesn't really make a difference, but you can't shield the title from any additional clouds on title or liens, mechanics liens, anything else. So paying for a title, it's totally worthless. I mean, it's not, there's no benefits. Like getting an appraisal today on a property, on an owner finance deal, a total waste of money. Because why? Why you can't finance it today. The only time the appraisal makes a difference is at the time that you're qualified for conventional financing. Unless you're paying cash, of course. But that's not what we're talking about. We're talking about owner financing. So we don't get title searches. We don't do appraisals up front. Down the road, yes, when the buyer's qualified. But up front, it's a total waste of time and money. Okay? Again, more bad information. Going back to the article, according to Jason Burkholder, broker, sales manager, real estate agent with Weichert Realtors in Lancaster, Pennsylvania, most mortgages have a due on sale clause, okay, that prohibits the seller from selling the home without paying off the mortgage. So if a seller does owner financing and the mortgage company finds out, it will consider the home sold and demand immediate payment of the debt in full, which allows the lender to foreclose. Now, I did an entire podcast episode on this called what was it called? The biggest urban myth boogeyman in real estate investing. You guys go back and listen to that whole thing. It's the due on sale clause, okay? In 30 years, I have never found anyone that had a note accelerated because of a transfer of title, okay? Not once. Now, if you guys can find it, you let me know. But I have never once, ever found anyone. And we've done it, time and time again, where the lender contacted them and said, hey, we noticed that title has transferred and we're going to accelerate the note. Why do they not do that? The reason that they don't do that is because they are in the interest collection business. And as long as the payments are being made on time, they don't care who pays the mortgage. Okay? They don't care whose name the title is in. It's absolute nonsense. This is one of the, again, urban myth boogeyman that's out there. Is there a due on sale clause in every institutional mortgage that's out there? Absolutely, there is. Okay? And do lenders accelerate notes if there's a title transfer? I've never seen it in 30 years. Not once. Okay? When do they accelerate a note? When you stop paying. Okay? That's when they accelerate the note. They file what's called a lis pendens, which is a notice of litigation saying, hey, you haven't paid us, so we're going to sue you for foreclosure, right? But not because title transferred. And let me put it to you like this, just so from a common sense underwriting standpoint. Somebody owes you money. Do you care if Joe that owes you money pays you what you're owed, or John, his best friend, pays you the money? I don't care. I just want to get paid. Okay, and that's exactly the way the lenders look at it too. Now, that's not to say. Let me put a caveat in here. That's not to say that a lender under that clause could legally accelerate the note and demand that the entire thing be paid off. But this is real estate investing. It's not real estate insurance, so it is one of the risks that goes along with it. Never had it happen. Okay, can't find anybody else that's ever had it happen either. So if you guys know of anybody that's ever had that happen, by all means, let me know, because I'd love to know what the circumstances were that would cause a lender on a performing note to accelerate that note. Okay, about the only time that I can think of that you would ever see that would be like right now rates are at what? I don't know what they are today, but they're ridiculous. 2.5%, 3%, somewhere in there. And if we get into this inflationary environment, all of a sudden they go to 9%, then you got two things going on. One, people will argue that a seller would accelerate the note because then they could get out of the 2% loan and get 9% and get a 7% additional spread. Well, maybe they can and maybe they can't, because the problem is that if you can't pay off the note, okay, well, let me back up. If you do pay off the note, well, then they don't have a loan anyway, all right? If you can't pay off the note, they got to foreclose, and then they have to sell it. Maybe they sell it, maybe they don't. So maybe they don't get the 9%, all right? So, it's one of those things where you'll hear that argument sometimes, but it's kind of ridiculous, okay? It's my experience, the experience of other people I know that have been in the business for 30 plus years, never can find anybody that's ever had a note accelerated based on due on sale, okay? Now, one thing I want to tell you about this is, yes, we all know that the due on sale clause is there, okay? Now, at the same time, you're like, well, you're violating, you're knowingly violating a clause that's in the clause. Well, it says they may. It doesn't say that they have to. It doesn't say that they're going to. It says that they may, number one. And number two, there's another clause in every mortgage that's ever been signed. Well, maybe not that's ever been signed, but every conventional institutional mortgage that's ever signed that states that you agree not to bring any hazardous chemicals into the property. Well, what's the very first thing you do when you move in? You bring in a ton of hazardous chemicals. So you have no problem violating that clause. By hazardous chemicals, what am I talking about? Detergents, Drano, Clorox, gasoline and oil and stuff in the, pesticide, all of that stuff that you guys have in your garages, in your pantries, under the sink or whatever, or in your cabinets in your laundry room. All that's there, and it's a violation of the mortgage, okay? But nobody's worried about getting their note accelerated because of that, even though they agreed not to do exactly what they did, okay? So that's not trying to justify it. I'm just trying to tell you, you need to understand what we're talking about here. They got a lot of provisions in here that, are ridiculous. And I used to tell people this back in the day when I was in mortgage banking, that every clause that you see in a mortgage is there because some lender someplace got sued and lost based on whatever it is that they're talking about, okay? And so they're trying to protect themselves. And that's why when you go to a closing, you're signing 80, 90, 100, 120 pages of nonsense, okay, that nobody reads, okay? So due on sale clause, I don't care what anybody tells you. Urban myth, boogeyman. Not saying it can't happen, just saying in my personal experience and the experience of literally hundreds and thousands of other investors that I've dealt with over the last 30 years, nobody else can find anybody that's ever had it happen as well on a performing note. And again, the only time that it would happen would be on a non-performing note where you're not making the payments, but that has nothing to do with due on sale. That has to do with the fact that you're in default and they file a lis pen. It's two entirely different things, okay? All right, so back to the article. What sellers need to know. Keep these tips and realities in mind if you're considering financing the sale of a home. You needn't necessarily finance the sale for long. Okay, that's true. As a seller, you can at any point sell the promissory note to an investor or lender to whom the buyer then sends the payments. That's true. According to Robin Daniels, a real estate investor and landlord in Central Florida, many sellers are afraid of selling with owner financing, but do not know that the note they hold is something that can be sold to someone else. Of course it can. It is a negotiable instrument. It's called a security. Okay? And she goes on to say this could happen same day as the closing, so the seller gets cash right away. That is absolutely 110% true. All right? In other words, sellers don't need to have the cash, nor do they have to become lenders. Be aware, however, that you will likely have to accept less than the full value of the note in order to sell it, thus reducing your return on the property. That's true, because their notes are typically sold at a discount. Promissory notes on properties typically sell for 65 to 90% of their face value, according to, they actually cite a source finally, a Marinote Exchange company that specializes in secondary market financing. Okay, so that part's true. All right, make seller financing part of your pitch to sell the property. Since seller financing is relatively rare, that's not true. Promote the fact that you're offering it, starting with the property listing. Adding the word seller financing available to the text will alert potential buyers and their agents that the option is on the table. Okay, I think that's smart in the event that you can't sell conventionally. Obviously, if you can sell conventionally and get your cash or get out from underneath the note, that would be the way to go. That would be my advice as an investor. But if not, then seller financing can solve a lot of problems. Okay, that's what if you listen to my podcast, that is exactly what I explain to sellers in the event they can't sell conventionally. All right, back to the article. When potential buyers view your home, provide more detail about the financing arrangements. Prepare an information sheet that describes the terms of the financing, along with a general explanation of what seller financing is, since many buyers will be unfamiliar with it. Well, that's probably true as well. All right, next up, seek out tax advice and consider loan servicing help. Since seller finance deals can pose tax complications and they don't pose tax complications. You have a capital gain. This is me talking now. You may or may not have a capital gain. It all depends. And if you do have a capital gain, then it's realized only when a payment is made on a monthly basis. So it's not like say you have a total capital gain on a sale of $200,000. You do a seller financing deal. You're not paying $200,000. You're not paying taxes on the $200,000 capital gain at that point in time. No, you would be paying it basically on a per diem or pro rata basis as each principal payment is made. Okay, assuming there was a gain to begin with, and in many cases there won't be. So, as an example, if you have lived in the property 2 of the last 5 years as an owner occupant, and you sell on seller financing with, let's say, a 3-year balloon, you're not, you've got capital gains exclusions of up to $250,000 for an individual and $500,000 for a couple. So you wouldn't even have a capital gain. So again, more nonsense in the article I don't even know what they're doing. You got somebody who's like putting this mixed mash of stuff. It's like somebody they hired off Fiverr or something to put this thing together. I don't know. All right. Also, your experience and comfortable as a lender, consider hiring a loan servicing company to collect monthly payments, issue statements, and carry out the other chores involved with managing a loan. Now, I'm going to tell you this from my personal experience. That is an absolute disaster waiting to happen. Okay. And even though it sounds great in theory, I have never once ever had that happen where payments went to a loan servicing company and ended up being paid to the mortgage company on time. Matter of fact, about, what year is this, 2020? I want to say probably 10 years ago, did a deal, and we ended up using one of those companies like that. Very first time I had done it, and buyer making payments, but the seller's mortgage wasn't getting paid, and ended up having to have a come to Jesus meeting with the loan servicing company and explained that I had a client that was a special agent for Homeland Security, and if they didn't straighten it out within 24 hours, he and I would be having a conversation with one of his buddies at the FBI. Okay. Because you got wire fraud, you got all kinds of crazy stuff going on. So I have never personally had great experience with those companies. There are people that are out there that will tell you that they have and who to use, but I can't recommend anybody to do that because I've just never had a good experience with it. Typically what ends up happening are sticky fingers. So be very, very careful if you end up going down that route. All right, back to the article. Help for seller finance deals. Both parties in a seller finance deal should hire a real estate attorney or real estate agent to write and review the sales contract and promissory note along with related tasks. Again, nothing could be further from the truth. And if you don't think so, like I said, I already covered this part about the real estate attorney. Number one, the only real estate attorney that you want to use, if you're going to use one at all, is a real estate litigator. Okay, not some guy down at the title company who just sits there and closes mortgages all day long for $400 a mortgage. Okay, not who you want handling your contract. As far as real estate agents go, most of them know less about owner financing than you do. Okay, and by the way, they're not allowed to provide any type of legal guidance. Okay, because it's called the legal practice of law. Okay, because they're not licensed as attorneys. So I wouldn't advise that as well. If you're going to do it, you need to get with a real estate litigator. Okay, when I had my contracts drawn up back in, 2000, I want to say late 2008. It was actually a real estate investor and a real estate litigator that we did a deal on his own. He's in Marietta, Georgia, in Atlanta. Oh, you guys know where the big chicken is. And I had him draft the contract, right? And I also had him provide on his letterhead what's called a letter of opinion, because I wanted to get out of jail free card in the event that there were any provisions in the contract that weren't, let's say, enforceable, okay? And I also had to provide all of the existing statutes supporting our position for the way we put the contracts together, because we have a number of tweaks in our contracts that help us, I don't want to use the word circumvent, but avoid certain necessities like foreclosure, okay? And we had to put all this stuff together. And so when I did that, I had him put together the contract, and then I want a statement from him, letter of opinion based on his letterhead, and then I also want, here's all the statutes that back up and support what his position is, okay? That's how you do it the right way if you're going to use a real estate attorney. Do not make the mistake of thinking that just because you hired a real estate attorney that your contract is legit, correct, non-fraudulent, enforceable, ironclad, whatever, because they are not providing you insurance, okay, that you're not going to get sued. And if you do get sued, they're not going to be the ones defending you. Okay, so you need to make sure you know what you're doing. And if you don't, then you're getting somebody that actually does know what they're doing. And that's why I only advise, if you're going to use an attorney, to get a real estate litigator, not just a real estate attorney, right? So there you go. There you have it. Okay, back to the article. Try to find professionals who are experienced with seller-financed home transactions and experienced with where you live, if possible, since some relevant regulations, such as those that govern balloon payments, do vary by jurisdiction. Yeah, that's kind of true and not true, because Dodd-Frank really kind of all encompass that nationwide as it relates to balloons. All right, back to the article. Professionals can also help the buyer and seller decide on the particular agreement that best suits them and circumstances of the sale. I assume if you had an attorney, yes, they could possibly do that. Okay, again, realtors cannot offer legal advice, so I would say no on that. If it isn't a seller finance deal, real estate investor and realtor Don Tepper of Solutions 3D LLC points out that there are actually dozens of other ways to buy other than a traditional mortgage arrangement. Okay, that's true. These arrangements, Tepper points out, include lease option. Well, you cannot buy on a lease option. Lease purchase, you cannot buy on a lease purchase. No, those are what are called disguised sales. Again, more bad information in this article by Investopedia. Land contract, yes. Contract for deed, they're the same thing. Equity sharing and wrap mortgages. Wrap mortgages, basically also otherwise known as subject to. Buying subject to with a wrap-around mortgage, okay? Most buyers and most real estate agents don't know how any of these work, he says. Whoa, my goodness, he's absolutely right. They don't, okay? All right, back to the article. Bottom line, as unusual and unfamiliar as it is to most people, seller financing can be a helpful option in challenging real estate markets. However, the arrangement triggers some special risks for buyers and sellers, and it's wise to engage professional help to mitigate those and allow the process to run smoothly. Hire a pro. Compare. Now we're on to something else where they're trying to sell. Okay, I'm sorry. That's a sponsored ad. So that was it. The bottom line. Engage professional help to mitigate risk and allow the process to run smoothly. Again, like I said, if you're going to hire somebody, it needs to be a real estate litigator. That's it. Period. End of story. All right. So now, what's the purpose of all this? Well, number one, like I said, bad information coming from a perceived authority, Investopedia. Okay, this thing is riddled with fallacy and things that are totally incorrect, and it's being promoted by a quote unquote guru, who after I made my comment discussing all of the things in here that were incorrect. Of course, I got unfriended immediately because why? Because it's not about helping you guys. Right? It's about lining the pockets of the guru. And of course, they can't have their information held up to scrutiny. Okay? That's why, if you go back to the podcast, one of the very first, matter of fact, we did 2 hot seat webinars. You can listen to them on the podcast. One was with attorney Angelo Russo, where I grilled him on his contract. Okay, he's an attorney, actual real estate attorney. And then number 2 was we did Turnabout is Fair Play, and he went line by line through mine. And we went through the whole thing for, what was it, 2.5, 3 hours, something like that. Absolutely, line by line. We went through the whole thing. I'm like, hey, look, I'm totally transparent. Here it is. Let's go. You're an attorney. You want to cross-examine me on this thing? I have no problem with that whatsoever, right? Because I can take it. And I don't have any issue with what we're doing and the legitimacy of what we're doing and it being held up to scrutiny. But you get these clowns out there, these little internet celebrity guru wannabes that, maybe they're likable and, a lot of these guys, they hide behind Jesus and all this stuff. And ultimately, at the end of the day, they're wolves in sheep's clothing. All they're trying to do is fleece you, okay? And if that's not bad enough, then you go out there and you think you're going to do your due diligence, and you go up to an authority website like Investopedia, promoted by a guru, and you start reading through all this stuff, and unfortunately, you're led down this path of things that are just completely wrong. It's incorrect. It's just not fact. There's no basis in reality, okay? But it sounds good, Like I said, I don't know if it's like somebody like they hired on Fiverr to do this or what they did, or they copied and pasted stuff from a bunch of other articles or how this whole thing came to be. But nonetheless, it's loaded with garbage, okay? That absolutely is not true. And this is the kind of stuff by reading through these things that will cost you time. It will cost you money and lost deals, lost profit. And that's why it's imperative that you do your due diligence. And no matter who says it, even if it's me, okay, especially if it's me, because I'm not going to respect you otherwise, is say, hey, proof up. Because I'll proof up. When people come out and they say, oh, this is against the law or this is blah, blah, blah. I'm like, great. Where's the statute? Show it to me. I want to see it. Okay? And guess what? In, I don't know, the last 10 years of doing that, I've only ever had one person actually proof up with the actual statute. Okay? And it was great. He was right and I was wrong. And guess what? Was I upset that I was wrong? Well, I don't want to be wrong, but I was not upset that I was wrong. I took it as a learning lesson. I was like grateful now to have that knowledge because my due diligence had not produced the same information. And so I wasn't upset at all. I was like, oh, okay. Yeah, man, you got me. Great job. Okay. I did not know that, but now I do. And so it was a learning lesson for me. And I was happy to have that learning lesson because I'd rather, take it on the chin and be proven wrong and then know going forward than to not know. Okay. And that's what you guys need to do as well. So like I said, be very careful who you listen to. It's like, I think it was Mark Twain said, believe none of what you hear and only half of what you see, and you'll be okay. That's what you have to do when you do your due diligence, okay? And be very careful with what these guru guys are telling you, okay? Because, like I said, in this particular thing, all I did was say, hey, man, this article is full of garbage, and boom, unfriended, just like that. Why? Because he can't have all of his little bobbleheads hearing the truth that he doesn't know what he's talking about, okay? And he's offering them up information that is loaded with things that are totally incompetent and incorrect. But that's Facebook fairyland of real estate investor gurus. So there you have it. All right. Hopefully that was helpful, beneficial. If you want to learn how to do things the right way, hit me up. I've got programs. We've got joint venture partner programs. We've got training program. We got all kinds of stuff. You got the podcast you can listen to. You can hear live deals going down. Actual phone calls with me, buyers, sellers, realtors, mortgage brokers, you name it, joint venture partners. You can hear exactly how everything works. Get all the information. You hear all the scripts, all everything. It's all free. It's on iTunes. Here, where is it at? On iTunes. We're on SoundCloud. We're on Spotify. We're on Spreaker. We're on iHeartRadio. We're on, what else? Who else is out there? Google Play or Google, whatever they're calling it now. They just changed the name of whatever the Google podcast thing is. But all kinds of free quality information that you can use to make money literally today, okay? But what I don't do is I'm not pulling any punches and I'm not going to give you any fluff, okay? right? So if you go through here, and it's kind of weird how they do this. I don't know this deal with the review thing. On one of them, it says 4.8 out of 5, and you can see all these 5-star reviews that are on here. And on the actual app itself, it's like 5 out of 5. They got some kind of calculation error. But if you go through on the podcast, I mean, 5. I don't know these people. Most of them, I know some of them, but most of them I don't have any idea who they are. And it's 5-star review after 5. And it's not to pat myself on the back. It's because people they get tired of all the bad information that's out there. Okay. So here's an example of one. I should have listened to Vincent from the start. Whoever this is, MMM621. This is back in July. I started wholesaling last December 2019. Like most, I listened to the Wholesaling Inc. podcast. Generated leads. But I really had no clue what to do with them. I got under contract on a few properties, and they both fell through. And I felt extremely bad because my intent was to never close. Okay. Listening to Vincent, I feel confident in what I'm doing, and I'm glad I'm doing it the right way. Okay. In other words, he finally found out how to do things correctly by listening to me. And that's where you guys need to be as well. I don't mean that to sound arrogant or braggadocious or whatever, but, if you go through these reviews, okay, here's another one. This man tells it like it is, blah, 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 not mincing words, dropping knowledge, blah, blah, blah. It's just one after another, next after the next after the next. And it's there. It may not be the most shiny, bestest podcast ever. My wife calls it the cure for insomnia, but you're going to hear the truth. Okay, you're going to hear facts, and you're going to hear things that you can back up and substantiate and verify, and you're going to get the tools and skills that you need. And there you have it. That's it. You guys, hope you have a great day. Let's go make some money.